Hey, peace and blessings. It's your brother Sorry. Back again with another one. If you like what you've been hearing, like and subscribe. Appreciate the love thus far, man. Gonna get into this. I know y'all see the title of the video. Um, yeah, we're gonna go back to the foothills of the mountains of the moon. Kick it with the Twa one again. Again, we've been quoting out of let's see this book right here. Let's see here, Pygmy Kitabu. All right, by Jean Pierre Hallet and Alex Pell. Been going into a lot of that information, cross-referencing it, and a lot of this in a lot of the other videos from this particular series on the Torah, just cross-referencing it with other works, kind of showing the antiquity, the age of the Torah, the length of time they've been on the planet, the migration patterns, and a lot of the stories that's kind of that they talk about or they say, and as we see from the stories of the Torah with them being pretty much the oldest tribe of Africans that we can verify on the planet, a lot of the global mythology seems to have its origin in a lot of the stories that the Twa tell. So, in keeping with that same thing, we're gonna go on Heru's journey real quick. You know what I mean? Okay, so we're gonna start off real quick. Like I said, I sometimes we do the internet, we use the internet to do the little light lifting, but we still gonna get into that bibliography. You know what I mean? Just as the main course, but this is coming from Wikipedia, right? Okay, the hero's journey in narratology and comparative mythology. That's pretty much what we've been doing. The hero's journey, the hero's quest or hero's journey, also known as the monomyth, is the common template of stories that involve a hero who goes on an adventure, is victorious in a decisive crisis, and comes home changed or transformed. Right? Let's see here. Let's see. Campbell used the monomyth to analyze and compare religions. In his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he describes the narrative pattern as follows. A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered and decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. So that's a template for something that's called the monomyth. That's something that's present in pretty much all of your stories. If you from mythology to movies like Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings, it's the monomyth is present. Now, when we go back to the Twa, taking this back to them, as we see with them, when we get into stories, let's say like Adam and Eve and all that, or whatever the case may be, not only do they have that story, that story, as far as they're concerned, is applied to them specifically. Um, um, it's not in the same way that the rest of us look at like Adam and Eve. Okay, those are the first human beings from a myth, from a however you view it type sense, and all other humans come from them. Nah, they talking about like as far as they're concerned, the Adam and Eve in that story is of their tribe, is of their specific people or whatever. So it hits a little bit closer to home. So similar to that, when we talk about the hero's journey in the monomyth or whatever case may be, um, when the word hero is a derivative of the Egyptian deity Heru, right? And we talked about the various phases as far as the Egyptian phases of culture, the Sabaean phase, the lunar phase, the solar lunar phase, and the solar phase, as mentioned by Gerald Massey in his book Ancient Egypt, Light of the World. But when we so the Heru of the dynastic Egyptians is more of a solar deity, but this is the first Heru. This would be Harubes. So this story coming from the first people may be the first, if not one of the earliest iterations of what we view as the hero's journey. So we're gonna get into this a little bit, right? Okay, and now I'm gonna start off with page 163 in Pygmy Kitabu. It's called The Myth of the Savior, right? And before we really, and before I even get into this, I know I really haven't. I've quoted a lot out of this book, but I just want to. It shows pictures, you know, of the pygmies. So I just want to, or the people from the Twa tribe. So I just want to kind of show that, so you kind of see what we're talking about. You know, you know, they don't look like they're bushmen, but they don't look like cavemen or nothing. There's like a lot of the people in this book, I'm sure half of us, we got people in our family that look just like this. Just look like some of your cousins and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, yeah. Some of the pictures of the Twa, I know some of them look like grandmama now. You know what I mean? But we're gonna go to all right. We're gonna get to the myth of the savior, right? Pygmy Kitabu. Okay. Okay, the myth of the savior. Bess and Horus, the pygmy father and youthful hero of the Metanech Stella, were the virtuous foes of a monstrous man serpent who was sometimes called the Roarer. Remember we were talking about the Sabian phase and the migrations of the Twa. They exist. They're around during that time or whatever. And at some point, there's a contention between this serpent or Ophidian current on the planet and the Twa, as we see here. The Egyptian fiend roars like a tornado in the stories told by Bess's earthly kinsman of the eastern Ituri. Some Ifa narrators say that he roars like an automobile. The modern pygmy metaphor has been inspired by the traffic on the Belgian-built highways that traverse the formerly paradisical forest near the mountains of the moon. Like every pygmy legend, the story of the savior's birth and battle with the monster is told a little differently by every pygmy elder. The following version was recorded by Shabesta in the eastern Ituri. The Lulu monster was huge, big as a Negro's house. He dwelled in the deep forest and menaced men. One day he came out with a terrible roar, demolished all the camps and devoured the people. The only survivors was a pregnant woman who managed to escape unseen. When the time of her delivery approached, the unseen child spoke to his mother from her womb. Mother, how shall I come forth unto the light? He did not wished to enter the world like other children, so he opened a path through a hole under the big toe of his mother's right foot. All of a sudden, he became tall, wise, and knowing in the use of arms. Mother, you are all alone. Where are the others? He asked, surprised. A monster swallowed them up. Answered the mother, I was the only one who escaped, and you came into the world afterwards. Her son said, show me the monster. I want to kill him and avenge my own. So if you listen to we reminiscent of the story of Jesus Christ, where Herod's trying to kill him. They send him to Egypt and stuff like that to hide out or whatever the case may be, and then he comes back. We read about the story of the latter story in Egyptian mythos of Horus being hunted by his uncle Satuk, and he hides in the swamps of the Delta until he gets older or whatever. We read about the story of Zeus or whatever case may be, similar. You see what I'm saying? Being hid away from Kronos eating him and stuff like that. So we get this recurring theme and a multitude of these stories. Just continuing. Um, he already had his father's spear in his hand. Courage and audacity sparkled in his eyes. Showed me the monster. He insisted to his hesitant mother, who did not wish to send her only son to the certain death. For the Lulu was tall as a tree and more furious than all the animals of the forest put together. Her son would not be placated. She had to lead him through the forest. She chanted, Lulu Odi Ove, Lulu, killer of man. Astonished, the Lulu monster cocked his ears. Someone was calling it. Who could be calling it? Had it not killed all of the men, it hurled forth, roaring like an automobile. The monster crashed down trees as it came. The mother heard the trees breaking. She saw it approach and she ran, terrified, to her son. He stood his ground courageously with two spears stuck in the ground beside him. He brandished the third in his mighty hand. Thus he waited for the monster. Flee, my son, hide yourself, begged his mother. He stood firm. The Lulu monster opened its mouth, as big as a house, to swallow him. He brandished his spear, ready to throw it into the blood-red mouth. Do not do it, my son, cried his terrified mother. It is futile. His lance was already whirling through the air. It passed through the jaw and the neck of the monster. With a frightful thud, the Lulu fell to the ground. Quickly, its conqueror cut the monster's neck and took off its head. He stood in front of the dragon that had devoured all men, about to open up its belly. Then he heard voices speaking to him from the monster's belly. He heard, "Be careful, do not pierce me. I am inside." In the interior, there were still living men. The caution he carried out his task. The first man whom he liberated was recognized by his mother. It was the father of the hero. Joyous, the father hugged his son to the breast. All of those who came out of the monster were grateful. Each of them gave the hero a young girl for a wife. Thus, he became chief of his country. Okay, now don't that sound like the Osirian drama? Don't that sound like Jonah and the whale? Don't that sound like death and resurrection? So this is one of the earlier stories. I know we see various different elements of various different things within this, from other mythology. And you even another thing that we're gonna get into a little bit later, when the monster that they talk about in this is also a metaphor for a flood or a great catastrophe, as we're gonna get into. Okay, the son was armed with three spears, the weapons of his father, Ife, the giant monsters of heaven, and three iron spears. He brought the spears with him when he came back to earth and went to his house, expecting a hearty welcome from his wife Matu, instead refusing to acknowledge or recognize Ife. Doro, the younger brother and or prodigal son of Ife, recognized the heavenly hero without hesitation. There was a joyous reunion, and it seemed that all parties would live happily ever after. Now we discovered that Ife was apparently assassinated by a giant monster after this hypocritical scene. Osiris likewise returned from a lengthy trip abroad to a welcome home party staged by his brother Set, a certain queen of Ethiopia named Aso, and 72 confederates who conspired to assassinate the godly king of prehistoric Egypt. Osiris' presumptuous son Horus later speared and beheaded Set, the scheming man who was responsible for the murder of Osiris. After being beheaded, Set turned into a serpentine monster, a Pepi, known as the Roarer. Doro, the delinquent male or of Pygmy legend, is identified with the infamous Lulu monster. This creature is a giant ogre-like man who, according to many Pygmy bands, can transform himself into the vast serpent called Kituri or Situri, and the other supernatural monsters of Pygmy theology. So again, we see this motif of the serpent being deemed as evil. It's a contention with the serpent now. You see what I'm saying? Originally, the serpent was a symbol of wisdom and all that, and now we see this is one of your first dragon slayer type stories, right? Okay, as the brother of Matu and of All Father Ife. All Father Ife sound like All Father Odin, don't it? This picturesque character is Set, the brother of Isis and Osiris. Matu behaved in in highly suspect fashion during the complex events of the dragon fighting story. She ostensibly tried to dissuade the young hero from fighting the dragon because she did not wish to send her only son to certain death. When the beast was about to swallow her only son with his gaping blood red mouth, and his certain death seemed far more imminent. She tried to prevent the hero from hurling the spear that he brandished in his mighty hand. Isis was present at the fight, and because she in some way supported Set against Horus, her son turned upon her and with the fury of a panther of the south and cut off her head. So this is a story of her head being cut off by the sun, because interestingly enough, like as we got into the information about the Ophidianism and everything like that in the last video, the deity Ophion and everything like that we were talking about, um when we get into that, the name Eve or Eva is as in like Adam and Eve, Eva, Mount Evan, all that stuff like that. That's associated with the serpent. So um, the woman had the woman and the serpent kind of had a thing going on anyway. If you look into the whole idea of the serpent, it's of a matriarchal type um, situation or whatever, as opposed to your later solar worship and things like that that became a little bit more associated with the patriarchal society. So we're going to continue page 166. After the spear fight, Aepha's avenging son was made chief of his country. Horus took his seat upon the throne of Osiris. The tune of this proclamation: Horus is triumphant in his presence of the whole company of the gods. The sovereignty over the world hath been given unto him, and his dominion is in the uttermost part of the earth. On the story of his battle with the monster, Egyptologist Budge comments, we have no means of assigning a date to this composition of the above legend. Like I said, look at who it's coming from. And they don't know when they arrived at this. This may be one of, if not the first iteration of the hero's journey as we know it. And I know I'm not breaking down the hero's journey like that, but those of you who are familiar with the hero's journey, you're going to see that all throughout this whole little story, whatever case may be. This is where your motifs of the Savior come from, the death and resurrection. Remember when we get into some of the material, I know we got to do. I kind of separate the true master material all to itself or whatever. But even when we get into the idea of the Savior archetype as it pertains to that, the Savior gets crucified. So this, even in this story, you see the Savior dying. You see what I'm saying? Or the hero dying, and then he goes through a period of death, resurrection. He has to go somewhere, whatever case may be, and he comes back as the anti-hero of sorts, and he can do things that the hero could not previously do. So let's keep going. Okay, Egyptologist Budge comments, we have no means of assigning a date to this composition of the above legend, but it must be very old, and it is easy to see that it is only a version of the older legend of the combat between Ra and Apep. So it's so at some point the serpent is contention against the serpent worship or this serpent presence on the planet or whatever case may be. Because what did we say previously? I know we correlated previously Apep with Ophion previously on the previous video. So let's keep going. Okay, the older legend of combat between Ra and the Pep and Heru, Ur, and Sut. And we say Set was associated with the Pep, Heru, Ur, and Sut, and Heru, Behutet, and Set. And it is, of course, one of the sources of all the post-Christian legends of the overthrow of dragons by kings and heroes, i.e. Alexander the Great and St. George. So whenever we run into these stories of the Dragon Slayer from Beowulf on down, this is potentially the source of it. And this is the first Horus as it pertains to that. So even as it pertains to biblically, when you have a savior that has to go into the underworld, or has a savior that has to fight Shaitan or some evil force or some dragon or some monster or something like that, he has to die and then he comes back more powerful. Sound familiar? So I mean, when we explore this stuff, we're not exploring this stuff from a religious perspective. We're exploring this stuff with a mature mind. So we understand that this story can come from another story or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? We can't get stuck in the favoritism of this or that. The truth is where we going. We just going wherever this leads to. So that's what we're trying to understand it. Okay, skipping around a little bit. But this is page 167. The superhuman mother of Pygmy legend somehow managed to escape from the great monster that swallowed mankind. Okay, the Neo-Hamitic relatives of the North Hamitic Egyptians still tell many versions of the legend. The Tavita tribe, a branch of the East African Messiah, called it the story of the demon who ate people and the child. Their story begins, there was once upon a time a demon who was greatly dreaded by the inhabitants of the country in which he lived, owing to his principal food being human beings. Demon then proceeds to devour a large number of people and cattle, so many in fact that he thought he had exterminated the whole tribe. One woman escapes and hides with her child in a pit. She repeatedly urges her son to stay in the pit and avoid the demon, but the boy is determined to slay the great monster. He procures a spear and arrows by unexplained means, climbs with his mother on top of a tree, and lights a fire to attract the demon's attention. The story rushes to the spot and starts to cut down the tree with an axe. The boy kills him with arrows, descends from the tree, and resurrects the swallowed victims from the body of the monster. Similar, like how we talking about Zeus rescuing the Olympians from Kronos once he kills them. Um, Okay, the cattle emerge. Let's see here. The boy kills him with arrows, descends upon the tree, resurrect the swallow victims from the body of the monster. The cattle emerge when he cuts off the monster's fingers. One man comes out of its face, and the rest of the people return to the world of the living through the stump of its severed thumb. After holding a consultation, a grateful people decided to appoint the boy chief. So that's another version among the Maasai. They have that same story that we can identify among the pygmies. Skipping ahead to page 169, just some little points, some little pieces of it, you know what I mean? Hercules' father Zeus resurrected 5 Olympian gods and goddesses: Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Demeter, who have been swallowed by the ogre-like father Cronus. Zeus, the youngest son of Cronus, gave an emetic potion to Titan Cronus, thereupon vomiting up Zeus' elder brother and sister. They sprang out unharmed and expressed their gratitude by asking Zeus to be their chief in the ensuing war with the Titans. Alas, the Titans, who took the sacred fruit from the Garden of Paradise, led the Titans during their 10-year war with the Olympian gods. He was condemned to carry the sky on his shoulders. Cronus and the other defeated Titans were either confined in the underworld kingdom of Tartarus or banished to a British isle in the furthest west that probably corresponds to Plato's Atlantis. Okay, and just a note, whenever we talk about Titans, like how we talked about previously, that's polar mythology. That ties into polar mythology, so that's going right back into your whole Sabaean phase, or that goes right back into this whole period of time. That ties it right back into that thing. So that's another aspect of Titans. Okay, skipping down a little bit, All Father Odin is swallowed by the ferocious Fenris wolf during the apocalyptic cataclysms of Ragnarok. The canine swallowing monster was fathered by Loki, the delinquent blood brother who expedited the theft of the sacred fruit from the forest of Asgard, Troy. So it's like how we said earlier, it's further comparisons to be made to Jonah, when Jonah was swallowed in the belly of the whale. As far as the Bible is concerned, the story of Beowulf, Grendel. Let's see here. That's another iteration of this story. You also have the situation where Grendel's mother gets involved afterwards. And we said on previous videos, when we deal with the Sabaean phase and the whole Ethiopian concept, the thing that all these civilizations had in common was they had a iteration of this mother child worship and everything like that. So you get within that serpentine or serpent worshiping concept or whatever, there is a mother child dynamic or whatever. So that does tie into the whole Grendel and his mother thing, the serpent. You understand? All right, so page 172. After beholding Grendel's gourmet dinner, Beowulf rose up from his bed and wrestled the monster. Beowulf's men struck at Grendel from every side, unaware that no war sword, not even the finest iron or earth, could wound their evil enemy, for he had woven a secret spell against every kind of weapon, even every battle blade. The Ife hero used iron weapons that were not forged on earth. So remember the previous video we talked about Tahuti's alchemy versus Lord Shiva's Rasa Shastra. We were talking about how the pygmies were known to work metal at one time, and you have several pygmy deities that are associated with metallurgy, right? So let's see here. Beowulf later obtained an invincible sword from a supernatural source. During the wrestling match, he managed to wound Grendel with his bare hands. The ogre retreated to the swamps and dived down to his dismal lair beneath the lake of water monsters. Right, moving on down. In the pygmy legend, in the pygmy legend of Ife's trip to the underworld, The hero descends by a non-watery route near the subterranean river and cataracts of Mulu. I can't pronounce that. I ain't gonna try. He is waylaid by a hideous hag and imprisoned in a cavernous kingdom of the dead, whence he subsequently returns with a load of treasure. Beowulf's trip to the underworld blends this saga with the legend of the savior who beheaded the giant ogre and with other related stories. Grendel's mother apparently combines the infernal hag uh, with the primordial mother who brings causes or gives birth to death in many doom-packed episodes of Pygmy cosmic soap opera. Beowulf beheaded the wicked mother and son. The Egyptian hero Horus beheaded his mother Isis and the man dragon Prince of Darkness, who was usually represented as her brother. The Babylonian hero Murdoch fought Tiamat, the lady dragon, mother of the gods, and the demon who commanded the powers of darkness. Her son and second husband, Kingu, Tiamat had an estimated length of 300 miles, moved in undulations 6 miles high, and roared with a mouth that was 7 miles wide. The serpent manifestations of the Pygmies swallowing monster has no specific sex and might be regarded as a female. Tiamat combines the creature with Matu, the primordial mother, who departed from the ways of righteousness when she married her brother. She married her brother's son and second husband, Doru, the manly associate of the swallowing monster. The fragmentary Sumerian story of the battle with Tiamat declares that the dragon can only be wounded through the mouth or the belly. Ipha's avenging son speared the mother through the mouth and punctured its belly. Murdoch, the son of the great Babylonian god Ea or Enki, drove the evil wind into Tiamat's mouth and shot his arrow or dart into her vulnerable belly. He then split the dragon in two, made the heaven from half of her body, and fashioned the earth from the other segment. Odin, the son or father of Thor, meanwhile creates the heaven and earth by dissecting the ogre manifestation of the monster. Odin was assisted by his brothers Vila and Ve. Together they slew a giant known as the Old Frost Ogre Ymir, making the sky from the severed head and the rest of the world from the outer parts of his carcass. So you see this same uh, story repeat. And as we said, you can clearly see some sort of contention between the serpent at this point. They're killing the serpent at this point. Where previously, in a lot of the motifs with best, you're gonna see them killing the serpent. I think at this point, during in somewhere in your lunar phase, that's when that began. The serpent lost its prominence. It said because the pole star changed, and it had something to do with them not being able to keep time properly. I think it also corresponded with other events on the planet as well. But let's keep going. All right, page 173. Okay, okay. Lulu, the giant ogre from the frosty countries of legend, can change at will into a serpentine monster. So there we go. The serpent. Um, Boreas, the north wind, like where they get Hyperborean from, because it's another personal theory of mine. That's probably what they're talking about. I think a lot of that mythology comes from the pygmy mythology or whatever, what have you. But let's keep going. Um, the north wind turns into the great serpent Ophion, like we talked about before, in the Pelagian Greek story of the beginning. Because remember, like we always do, we separate the Hellenes 700 BC to 323 BC from the Pelagians, who are a lot earlier. The manly associate of the Pygmies monster married Matu, the first woman and mother. They quarreled about the forbidden fruit and probably argued about other domestic affairs. Boreas Ophion. That's another iteration of Ophion, like how we talked about on the previous video. Boreas Ophion mated with Eurynomy, the motherly goddess of all things. Then this remarkable couple had an argument. Eurynomy and Ophion made their home upon Mount Olympus, where he vexed her by claiming to be the author of the universe. Forthwith she bruised his head with her heel, knocking out his teeth, and banished him to the dark caves below the earth. In Genesis 3:15, the deity warns a snake who persuaded Eve to steal the forbidden fruit. I will put enmity between thee and the woman seed and the serpent seed. That's in the book of Genesis. Okay, this is where that comes from. And between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Okay, now we're going to go back to the theme of these magical weapons. The idea of him being a blacksmith and everything like that. You know, in the story of Jesus, Jesus is a carpenter. That's kind of where how this comes from. A lot of themes. And again, like I say, we gotta be mature about this. Um, as far as not having an overt attachment to any type of ideology, just taking it kind of how it comes or whatever, how it unfolds. Okay, so Jesus is a carpenter. You have a previous iteration of the Jesus archetype is Heru or Horus. This is being the first iteration of Heru being a blacksmith. So that's how they arrive at Jesus being a carpenter. Is similar to that of the blacksmith or what have you. Okay, so let's keep going. This is page 175. The sun is armed with a rod of iron and caught up unto God and to his throne. Iphe's savior son and the conquering son of Egyptian legend was equipped with iron spears. Horus succeeded to the throne of Osiris with Pharaoh Pepi, the first place in the land of the Pygmies. Heru of Behutet, a form of the god, was the divine king of blacksmiths. So remember we talked about on the previous video that Lord Shiva was the deity of blacksmiths in the Vedic, in the Dravidian tradition. He was the deity of blacksmiths. Okay, so and we kind of correlated a lot of his attributes and things to best. Okay, so we're going right back here. Okay, so Harubiutet, a form of the god, was the divine king of the blacksmiths. The New Testament Christ was associated with the itinerant smiths, tinkers, and carpenters called Kenites and Rishabites. He was traditionally portrayed as the carpenter, son of a carpenter. The several incarnations of the Ife deities are smiths. So was Thor, the smith god, or son or father of Odin, who fights the Midgard serpent in the Germanic apocalypse. So a lot of your Germanic legends, like how we said, some people class the Celts as Ethiopians. So a lot of your Germanic myths and stories and stuff like that. I know they're they tie back into a lot of this Ophidian current and stuff like that, and they're gonna come out of your pygmy mythos and stuff like that, or have elements of the same pygmy mythos and stuff like that. So Thor ties heavily into Satuk, and as we can see, a lot of the aspects of the story and mythos of Thor also come out of this Haru. Let's see, the elves or dwarves forged the mighty weapons of Thor Ptah. The Egyptian god of smiths and craftsmen in general was pictured as a pygmy in the pottery resurrection figurines that show Ptah Sokar Osiris crushing serpents in his hand. Okay. All right, page 177. Pygmy Kitabu. The monster is called Lulu, Etruscan Lala, the moon goddess, Sumerian Lila, monster or demon, Babylonian Lilu, and Lilithu, the male and female forms of a monster or demon. Hebrew Lilith, the night monster, was the first wife of Adam. After she left her husband, she became a demoness who by choice preyed on little children. Iph's wayward wife, Matu, lures children and grown men to their destruction. As Shabesta reported, she sings and dances. She sings, dances, and beckons men from her lairs in mountain caves and rocky ravines. The Ife word Lulu has the phonetic variant Lura, Old High German Lur, elf or demoness, German Lurle or Lurrelai, a singing river siren who lures fishermen onto the rocks. Sounds like Odysseus in the Odyssey, the sirens. You see what I'm saying? He tied all the guys, all the men to their but where they tied him to the mast of the ship and stuff like that. I mean, it's long, you have to look up the Odyssey, but yeah. The Babylonian Lilu or Lil was sometimes represented as a kind of incubus who enticed young ladies. Enlil, the lord of demons, was the god of the earth. He was addressed as the great mountain and the lord of the storm, from which it is concluded that his original habitat was a mountaintop city, as there are no mountains in the Euphrates Valley. he, he must have been the god of a people living in a mountainous region or mountainous area who later immigrated to Babylon. I think we've run across that theme a couple of times, how they start, even when we follow this Ophidian current, they say it started in Egypt or Africa at least, and then it went up and out. When we read Celestial Ship of the North, it said that the Semites were just a later iteration of Cushites that just followed them as they traveled up. So, and that's one of the important reasons why we have so much bibliography in this. So, okay, let's see here. Let's go back. Okay, who later immigrated to Babylonia. Revelation's Dragon Mountains were the site of the Great Babylon. According to the Ife myth of the Savior, Lulu demolished the camps or cities of the ancient world. The Babylonian deluge legend describes an obvious volcanic cataclysm, right? So again, so what we get as well when we talk about this monster or what have you that was fought, we get the mythos of a great cataclysm. So it can be correlated with a literal contention, possibly, and also metaphorically a cataclysm, right? So let's keep going. And this also corresponds to the story of Indra and Vitra. A lot of these stories correspond. But let's see, we're page 182, Pygmy Kitabu, skipping around a lot, trying to cover just as much ground as we can. The sun, let's see here, the sun is the hero of the Ife resurrection. He is also the elder brother of Doro. So it's back to that story again. The story of him coming back from the hunting party and everything like that. The manly form or colleague of the monster. In the Australian legend of the two brothers, the hero. So there's an Australian legend because the way it's viewed by some is basically that at some far gone era, as far as you ask the Aborigines, they're not from Africa or nothing like that. It's that they're always been in Australia. But as far as some people would understand it or would theorize it or whatever, they're just another iteration of the Twa who got there at some far gone era. Just like if you ask certain indigenous people of America, you see what I'm saying? Did they come from somewhere else? They'll tell you they didn't come from nowhere else. They always been here, and it's assumed that at some far, far gone period of time, like how we talked about amidst all the cataclysms and everything like that, the Twa have been on the planet, God knows how long. So at some far gone time, when the planet was oriented different, as far as the poles is shifted, the plates, whatever the case may be, the continents, whatever temperate zones or whatever, they may have went to that particular place at some far gone era because pretty much they're so old. In the Australian legend of the two brothers, the heroic elder brother and the junior male are swallowed and resurrected by their kinsman, a supernatural serpent that resembles the snake manifestation of the Ife swallowing monster. This event occurred when the two brothers went fishing in a country called Gimbi, right? Okay, so this again, so we getting into because this contention between the serpent and the Twa, because it can't be forgotten that the Twa wrote the Book of the Dead. You know, so let's see, Pygmy Kitabu, page 185. The Egyptians would, and I'm kind of in the mid paragraph and all that, just kind of trying to get this point. The Egyptians would certainly agree that one should first of all spit to fend off the man dragon Set Apepi. So this is by the time Apep fell, Set and Apep fell out of favor. The first chapter of the first book of the ancient Egyptian book of overthrowing Apep was entitled the chapter of spitting upon Apep. These books of magical religious formula were daily recited by the priests in the temple of Amun-Ra, Thebes, the ancient capital of Upper Egypt. Mother, how shall I come forth unto the light? Asked the Ife Savior. A collection of, I think it's some of the Apocrypha Jesus speaks from his mother's womb. You see what I'm saying? A collection of Egyptian texts called Per Im Heru, coming forth by day, is now known as the Book of the Dead. Chapter 1 begins the chapter of the coming forth by day. Many vignettes show the god or the deceased spearing a serpent. The books of overthrowing Apep contain chapters entitled the chapter of taking a lance to smite Apep and the chapter of taking a spear to smite Apep. The monster, the savior, and the mother are symbolic personalities involved in a vast cosmic drama. Um, the mother corresponds to the same respects to our concepts of Mother Earth and Mother Nature. Okay, so we're gonna go into this now. This kind of deals with it from the perspective of the monster as a some sort of cataclysm, and the belly as them going into the earth to avoid the cataclysm. So this is page 190 in Pygmy Kitabu. In this story, Ife is armed with the three iron spears that he brought back from heaven. He goes hunting in the forest near the lunar mountains and travels through a cave into a ghostly kingdom whose entrance is traditionally located somewhere in the mountains of the moon. Right, in the myth of the legend of the Savior, Ife's son emerged with three iron spears from a mother associated with the mountains of the moon. He was born after the giant monster demolished all the camps and swallowed a man uh, who Mata identified as the father of the hero. We previously assumed that this man was the father incarnation of the Savior. Now it appears that the man who led the exodus from the mother's belly was the Savior's stepfather, Doro, the second husband of Matu. The Savior's son was installed as the chief of the country. A pygmy chief or king is by definition the elder because they don't have kings, they don't have chiefs, they just have tribal elders. No son could conceivably take precedence over his living father and govern a pygmy community. Ifa, the senior male, resumed command after he delivered himself from the womb of Matu by cutting a path through her foot. According to some pygmy versions of the story, the son of Matu was born as a child and immediately turned into a man. And in some of the versions of the story, he was always a man. He came out as a man. And we see those versions of the story as well when we get into some of your biblical stories. Because, like, when we get into, like, a lot of your biblical stuff, as we can see, um, that's like the remnants. It's like, it's the periphery and the remnants of various different empires and a lot of their stories and elements of various stories put together is sort of like the cliff notes of a lot of more ancient civilization stories. Okay, so page 191, the hero is Eve or Ife, the pygmy. He sets out to avenge the death of Avi or Afi, man, who has been swallowed by the monster. The words for pygmy and man are constantly interchanged because like how we was talking about before with the Adam and Eve thing or whatever, it's not, they don't view it as human. This is like personal to them. This is like their story. We're borrowing their story. We just apply it to humanity in general when we say Adam and Eve. Their This is their personal story. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so the words for pygmy and man are constantly interchanged. As a result, the monster alternately swallows pygmies and men who are alternately resurrected in the local variants of this story. Ife invariably survives the monster's onslaught in the sheltered womb of Matu. Ife, the godly father or nation, is the senior male of the legend cycle. Man is the human form of the junior male, Doru, an anti-hero who is innately good but performs all sorts of destructive deeds. Man is described in some pygmy stories as Ife's son, the tall white man. Lulu, the supernatural or geophysical destroyer, is a giant white ogre patterned after the human destroyer. Man is resurrected from the monster's bowels by his divine parent, Ife. The survivor is represented as the son of Matu, the mother of God. He achieves his miraculous birth as a child or a full grown man by traveling from the latter's womb to her foot and opening a path which expedites his return into the light of day. Ifa emerged through a tunnel whose entrance is located somewhere in the mountains of the moon, right? The lunar mountain is itself a form of the great mother, Matu. Ife went into the mountain through a cave and apparently sojourned in the ghostly kingdom while the cataclysmic monster ravaged the world. So, okay, so when we get into a lot, yeah, so for our purposes, you know, let's see, this would signify the story of, a flood, some sort of deluge or whatever. This goes back into that, going into the earth and emerging out after a flood, as well as emerging as an anti-hero who's able to contend with the conditions, or the serpent, in the case of this story, that may have killed a previous iteration, and avenging the father. Now, when we get into various different civilizations, we get into various stories of people escaping some kind of cataclysm and then emerging after, from within the earth after the flood, right? All right, so 194. During her hectic career as the first woman, Matu brought death to mankind by distributing the fruit of the forbidden Tahu tree. The Lunar Lady sorcerer's ghost preserved Aoife's life by feeding him fruit of an apparently different nature that detained him in the sepulchral kingdom, whence he triumphantly returned. They're talking about the kingdom of the dead. The flora of Eden included a forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil, and another tree whose fruit conferred immortality on those who consumed it. The Etruscan scheme takes place on the day of the sacred king's ritual death. Everyone thought that Ife had died when he failed to return from the boar hunt. He and his son are traditionally equipped with three javelins. The three javelins are carried by the members of the Etruscan cortege that leads the sacred king and his son out of the maze. The Pygmy tunnels lead into a legendary kingdom of the dead that is situated inside a mountain. A maze of pygmy-sized tunnels connect the chamber of an eerie Etruscan necropolis, city of the dead, that was discovered inside the Italian hill of Poggio Gagella. Or page 197. Ordinary men crawl on their hands and feet through the maze of Etruscan tunnels that are never more than 36 inches high. Stanley measured a full-grown, perfectly formed pygmy woman who was 33 inches tall. The smallest pygmy man on record was 36 and a half inches tall. The pygmy maintained in general that their ancestors were even smaller than the present-day representatives of their race. Homer Pygmies dwelled in caverns near the Great Lakes of the Nile. According to the Greek philosopher scientist Aristotle, the well-known caves of Mount Hoyo and many other caverns are located in the mountains that border Lake Edwards and Albert on the eastern edge of Ife territory. The Pygmies do not dwell in caves, which they represent as the lairs of spooks and monsters. Ife instead travel through maze-like caves or tunnels to a boreal kingdom inside or under a mountain, and is resurrected when he returns by his original route. All right, page 199. The Meadownet Stela portrays Horus' father as best, the pygmy harpist and dancer of God. I think in the previous video when we talking about the Philosopher's Stone, we're talking about the dancers of God and everything like that, who wore stylish cat skin clothing. Theseus was famed for his skill as a lyre player and dancer. He customarily traveled about in a lion skin garment, performing all sort of difficult labors. His resemblance to Hercules was proverbial. Hercules is another one in the lion skin garment. We see that as being a theme. These divergent forms of the Pygmy hero embarked on separate trips to the ghostly kingdom of Pygmy legend, where they met in a farcical, confused version of Ife's apparent death and resurrection, right? So these are just iterations of this. They're mimicking this in their mythology, right? All right, page 204. As the grand climax of his 12th labor, Hercules brought the dog dragon Cerberus up from the depths of Tartarus. Aoife cut a liana rope with the intention of hauling the carcass. Horus, the son of Osiris and or the pygmy best, dragged Set's body with chains, which the pygmies call metal ropes. Then Set turned into a serpent and hid in his hole. Hercules dragged Cerberus bound with adamantine chains up a subterranean path which leads to the gloomy cave of Acon near Meridine on the Black Sea. Page 205, almost done. Ife went to the cavernous kingdom of the dead and then had to stay for 3 months and part of the fourth month in his character as the long-lived patriarch Tammuz, right? It's a month named after Tammuz in the Jewish calendar. That's a whole Sumerian deity. You see what I'm saying? The king Danos or Deus of Berosus reigned in Babylonia for 36,000 years. When he died, he departed to Hades, or the abyss. Osiris, after reigning over the Egyptians, became the judge of the dead. Osiris' residence was traditionally located in the mountain of Amenten. Ament was a title of the Egyptian mother goddess, right? The mother of the mount, the mountain of the moon, is a form of the Ifa mother. The lunar angel Ifa went to his apparent death in the mountain. Osiris Moon and Thoth Moon were forms of the same deity. The tomb of the lunar monarch Thoth Hermes Idrisi was located by the Arab geographer in the mountains of the moon. Thoth reigned on earth for about 3,200 years before he embarked on Ife's ascent to heaven. The Babylonian patriarch reigned for 36,000 years before he set out on Ife's descent to the abyss. These gods or heroes are variants forms of Ife, Osiris. So this is where your Osirian drama comes from. This is where the whole um, Tahuti comes from, a lot of the attributes of Tahuti and everything like that. So that's why in the previous video we correlated Lord Shiva to Best, because he takes on pretty much the same um, attributes. Let me see here. I think I got one more little snippet and then we're gonna end this. All right. During his sojourn in the cavernous regions of the dead, Ife gave a musical performance that brought joy to the gloomy existence of the ghost. Now, this back to when we correlated Lord Shiva and his propensity as a dancer. You see what I'm saying? And we correlated that with being the Pygmies being the dancers of God. They were referred to as the dancers of God by the Egyptians. Okay, so and when we get into the Orphic um, um, stories in ancient Greece and stuff like that, Orpheus went into the underworld and he played a lyre and all that stuff like that. So that's kind of where we get this from. Okay, so during his sojourn into the cavernous kingdom of the dead, Ifa gave a musical performance that brought joy to the gloomy existence of the ghost. The great bard Orpheus charmed all the residents of Tartarus with his music and temporarily suspended the tortures of the damned. Orpheus was a priest of Dionysus, or Dionysus himself, the god whom the Dionysus is Osiris, the god who the Greeks identify with that eminent Egyptian music lover Osiris. Orpheus played on the lyre he had received from his father Apollo. Apollo, back we talk about his best, the god of musical arts, and the sun Ife played the harp of Bes. The Egyptians' pygmy god of the musical arts, Bes was the aged sun god of the Medinet Stella and the father incarnation of Horus the child, and hence of the Greek god Apollo, like I was saying earlier. Zeus, the father of Apollo, was imprisoned in the cave of the giant man dragon Typhon. Ife had to stay in the monster's underworld home for 3 months and part of a fourth month. So that's just that's like him being in the belly and everything like that. His son emerged from the cavernous mountain mother and fought with the monster. When the fourth day of his life dawned, Apollo sallied forth to fight the great beast Python. Like how we talked about when we talk about the Ophidian thing, sometimes you're gonna see it as Python in Greece, sometimes it's gonna be Piton, because the Y and the I are interchangeable. Who was identified with Typhon in Homer's hymn to Apollo. The solar musician was born on the floating island mountain of Delos, which was raised from the sea to provide a refuge for Apollo's pregnant mother Leto. Python is said to have sprung from the stagnant waters that remained after the deluge sent by Zeus in the age of the Greek Noah, Diasilon. His ark has been described as a moon ship, like the mountains of the moon. Zeus's son Megaera survived the flood at the peak of Mount Gerania, which remained above the water. This was the mountain of Geranos. The Greek crane, which was the sacred ibis of Hermes. When Typhon attacked Olympus, Hermes turned into an ibis, the very similar sacred bird of the Egyptian moon god Thoth, and the lunar angel Ife. Uh, so Zeus's son weathered the cataclysm at the lunar mountain of our old friend Ife, Thoth, Hermes, Osiris, Idrisi, and Camp. So that kind of correlates everything that we've been talking about. So a lot of your mythos of the Savior, the mythos of the journey to the underworld, the mythos of death and resurrection, and those the monomyth, that we read about, the going to another place, and coming back with some mythical weapon or some sort of new ability and stuff like that, and saving the world and everything like that. Even certain civilizations talking about hiding from a great cataclysm, going into the center of the earth, and then coming out after the cataclysm is over. All of these repeating and recurring themes or whatever. One of the first iterations that we see it in is the Twa. And the difference is a lot of the motifs that we as humans as a whole apply to ourselves, like stories like Noah's Ark or whatever case may be, or Adam and Eve or whatever case may be. Humans in general relate to those stories. Well, these stories are specific to what I call some of the most interesting people that nobody really talks about, but the Twa. And the Twa, your foundation, or foundational to the whole Egyptian mythos and everything that's built off. So I just wanted to kind of do that. I know we ran for about an hour on this one, but I appreciate y'all for checking me out. Y'all like the little pieces that we doing on, the 12 little history pieces, ancient world, whatever, and even some of the stuff we doing on True Master or whatever case may be. Y'all like and subscribe. Appreciate the love. Peace.